Hello. So this is my prototype for Kadigat 2024. I'm submitting it to Spatial Affairs, and you can find that information here. I'm just going to quickly take you through the presentation. So there are some things that I think it's not self-explanatory to everybody. So I decided to just make a short video. Of course, if you look at the screen, it looks like there's a lot going on, but really there are only four main actors. Over here, you see the actor called Noble. Over here, and these are the actors called Warrior. And over here, this point, at the nodes of this quadrilateral, there are the actors called Foliage. And you see this glittery haze. That's the fourth and final actor called Breeze. So there is the actor called Noble over here, and they have a private residence called Heimat, and they can choose to exit this space. The foliage itself is user-defined visual creation tools, for example, and I will show you the structure of the foliage in a bit, but essentially it's not the kind of plant that we are used to traditionally. It has a scope for expressing in terms of luxury aesthetics, in terms of desiderata, in terms of what you want to see around you, what you want to keep, what you want to leave behind, and what you want to display and flex, And the breeze is, as you can see, it has a timer. It moves away from the foliage and it has to come back. So the actor is temporarily bound to foliage location data. The warrior is spatially bound. If you see, the warrior is always lying on this particular path, and every time it comes across another actor, the warrior takes a bow. But if it comes across some occluded infrastructure, like a signpost, for example, then the warrior wrecks. So the warrior is shuffling and patrolling, and that's the way to maintain this particular actor identity, to be on the lines between foliage locations, where foliage locations are vertices and the line connects them. So the foliage location is a central point for warriors and the breeze, because the breeze keeps, periodically coming towards the foliage and performs an interactive action called ruffling. I will come to most of these. If you see the noble, then there is a mirror view of the noble itself and the avatar. And the noble is actually inside a manual boundary, outside the manual boundary condition, inside. Basically, when you set a manual boundary in VR space, then you are allowed to neglect certain regions, certain areas, and make it invisible. So there is the virtual infrastructure which prevents other VR actors from engaging with the noble. So the noble maintains this shroud of privacy, and a user-generated prompt like Exiont or exit Heimat allows them to, interact and see. So the noble also has some particular roles, and we'll come to that. Well, I don't know if this particular slide is important, but what I will say is, if you see these particular color gradients, this rainbow spectrum, then it's a link and you can click on it to explore further about where the artist is coming from. And for example, there's this really interesting mirror board that I've made recently. So this is the background, the kind of research that is guiding this artistic endeavor. And on top over here, you can see the notation that I'm using. This is similar to logical instantiation. And for all, that's a kind of instantizing, again, logically, that I needed. It's called spectra instantizing, and it's not really important, but I do want to make my work somewhat rigorous, there are some questions that I'm pursuing through mathematical ontology, using these symbols for ontological purposes. So I needed succinct notation to even perform some self-inquiry, And one of the criteria for choosing is legacy of the project, coherence or consistency in career. And I actually thought about this way back in 2018. And that was when I was applying to NID, and I thought, what do I want to do with my life? I want to do exhibition design, but what kind of exhibitions do I want to show? What is one thing that if I did it in this lifetime, then I will feel like my life had some meaning or some worthwhile cause. So this project came to me back then, and I thought about how craft and automation come together, that space between creating something but using techniques, a different technical reality to actualize it, but in a way that you're not feeling threatened, you're not feeling like you're being replaced, but actually you're expanding the meaning of what craft is and what crafted artifacts are. And primarily I was focusing on automation, but then later I saw the disruptive potential in so many technologies like blockchain, like technoetics, like moist media, biocomputing, nano, quantum. So then I decided that, yeah, we need to integrate all of these things as well. And there's a very personal edge to this as well, because I've always been someone who's sought after a certain hedonistic sensibility, luxury aesthetics. And when I entered into the sustainability movement, suddenly there was a friction, because on one hand, I'm chasing capitalistic desires, but on the other hand, I also need to make it ecologically sustainable and sensitive. So suddenly craft became the forefront of this entire thing, craft technology, craft automation, because I saw potential for craft to do both, to create something customized, exclusive, to create something really meaningful, and also ensure that it's sustainable. And when I say meaning, I have to be a little theological over here, because I am not talking about just a sense of personal meaning or a sense of um, mundane fulfillment or a peace. I do mean, when I talk about meaning, I've been theorizing or characterizing the highest form of meaning as an experience or encounter with divinity. And I feel like if you have artifacts that are crafted, that are lush, and you use them in that interaction, then you are able to connect with God. And this comes from the ontological position that I was raised in. This comes from my culture and history. And I really understood this back during COVID, when not a lot of people had the idea or privilege that, I can clean my space, because over here we hire a lot of people for manual labor. And suddenly during COVID, we didn't want that. We wanted to clean our own houses. And I was just looking at all of these things and analyzing, and suddenly I realized that from being a hierarchical, um, inequality, oppression-based system of labor, suddenly it became exclusive. It shifted to a form of privilege where it was privileged to be able to clean your own surroundings. If you were really busy and you couldn't manage, you were hustling between day jobs and computer screen to computer screen, and your time was entirely blocked, suddenly you were too tired to do any household chores. But if you had that space to relax, to take back, if your employer was considerate enough to give you that leeway, then suddenly you were organizing the space because you were inside the heimat, the home, all the time. And suddenly you were engaging with it in a very different way. And the tools that you were using, the broomstick, the cloth, for me at least, they acquired a different set of meanings. It became luxurious to be able to perform these things. And I kept thinking about, what if these were not like this? What if they were redefined? Would we still want to, you know, engage somebody else or force them by paying them a certain wage and force them to do this labor for us? What if we saw intrinsic meaning in doing these things? Then would we want to outsource it? Would we want to do it on our own? So then this became a question about craft and technology. If I had a cell phone, why does my cell phone look the same as anybody else's cell phone? Why does my computer look like this? Why is that this height? Why am I occupying this posture while interacting with it? So then started thinking about how, if a craft community could redesign everything about my current lifestyle, then what would it look like? Would technology even be the same way? Would architecture be the same way if I involved living and sentient aspects to this architecture? Then would my ecosystem, would my landscape keep evolving? Would it be more intelligent? Would it be more sensitive? Would it have, greater potential for co-living across species? So I made it my mission to somehow ensure that this project is actualized, and it's K24 for a reason, right? I wanted to do it in 2024, and I've been pursuing this in various capacities. So that was one of the first times I mentioned it. When they were taking my interview to the jury panel, I said, this is what I want to do. Then there was the 776 Foundation. These are the major ones. I have tried doing other things in different capacities, but I just thought maybe you want to see that I have not come up with this just for spatial affairs. It's something that I have been trying over the years. So in fact, there was this, never mind. But basically 776, I added the sustainability angle for that. It was not something that I was necessarily pursuing, but I realized that this is also there. Then there was this particular proposal to India Foundation for the Arts, and the budget was a little less for me to do this. Again, spatial affairs is also not enough for me, but because of AIRE and XR, it has that potential. I can get semantically close to K24, even if not in a very material and tangible sense. So the most recent proposal was to critical zones for science gallery, because I somehow thought that this is a critical zone that you need to inquire into, and that did not work out. And I think I did not put enough effort into the presentation. I just expected people to understand, and that's on me. So this time I really want to ensure that I have a proposal that is extremely hard to reject. So you can completely skip this particular slide if you're inclined to, but I'm going to go through it because I think it's important to understand what is the kind of research that's going to come out of it, right? Where is it coming from? And if I do write about it, if I produce outputs, then how is it going to look? And recently I saw that a lot of people, they laugh at the use of big words, and they call it pretentious, like you're just doing it for some just to impress somebody or some reason. Then I really started questioning my own practice, because this proposal is not an artwork, but everything I do, I approach it with that same mindset. So it is an artistic act making this proposal itself, and this document is art to me. So I also had to use certain words because they mean something in a philosophical lineage, in certain epistemes. It was appropriate for that particular occasion. So they're all coming from my engagement with literature, my engagement with philosophers and thinkers and designers mostly, I think. But we will get to that. So now K24 seeks to craft technical realities or rituals. And I came across this term while reading Yuk Hui's recursivity and contingency. In different ideas, I was looking for something like this, because a technical system would encompass all of these things. When I say I want to redesign all of life, it seems like an ambitious project. But when you start thinking about living in terms of technology, then you see that there is a unified framework already that is reconfiguring these aspects. It's literally taking space-time matter and changing the modality of it, how we interact with it, what we think about it, how we force each other to interact with it, how we cooperate, our systems of operations, politics, logistics, these techniques, so to speak. So I thought that technical realities was quite appropriate, because the word that I was using before was rituals. And that is also appropriate, but it could mean a lot of things. And when I think about ritual, if you think about a bird, right, a bird using a beak to open something, then the bird is doing it, but it's a technological intervention to secure sustenance. But is the beak just a tool or an artifact? Is it also the body? Is it technology? So that's the way I look at technology. It's extended presence. It's a way of mediating. It's a way of negotiating. It's a way of reconfiguring reality. And I think that that analogy works really well for me at multiple levels, because it's not that, my hand hangs here and the system's here, the keyboard's here, the phone is there. There is no discrete moment of gap. There's always that temporal sequence where I can just engage with the form, and it's not separate from my own body. So that's what I started thinking about. So when I say technical reality or ritual, it involves a redesigning of artifacts, bodies, resources, tools, materials, and intangible factors, techniques, operations, aspirations, semantics. It inquires into collective desiderata, designated as idyllicdrip, and seeks to mediate between the post-capital desire for hedonism and the intrinsic meaningfulness of sustainably crafted lifestyles. The project has 4 main stages: recruiting, priming, communing, and exhibiting. We seek to recruit next-gen, young, ambitious, and willing to appropriate tech, craftspeople across pluralities. We then hire experts and prime the recruits with contemporary techniques, allow them access to technologies that previously threatened them. Then we take a backseat and allow the craft community to redesign our life, including systems of consumption, sensibilities, aspirations, and the very real lived experience of interacting with technology. Finally, such a lifestyle is compiled and exhibited as a benchmark towards what we ought to strive for, as beings who value embodying both luxury aspiring and meaning seeking tendencies. I think that's a bit self-explanatory. And if you do follow the links, then you can understand more about what exactly recruiting, priming, communing, and exhibiting would entail. Craft necessitates sensitivity towards the medium and process, ecology being benefited from the care and sensitive approach. As an industry, it affects marginalized communities and empowers, if not emancipates, non-privileged citizens. It fosters a sense of community and celebrates the expressive capacity of customization, not unlike the exclusivity of luxury aesthetics. What is crafted is usually meaningful and lush, and I posit that these as key descriptors signify global yearnings. K24 seeks to actualize these yearnings through technology-enabled craft intervention. It relies on the craftsperson's sensibility for guidance and places them in power as a master, custodian, most ancient practitioner of technology. The exhibition might have fallen off the track. Right. So of course, one of the first things that I should have probably mentioned is it's not upliftment or empowerment or upskilling kind of a project. Although there are some similarities, the ways in which they are similar are that, yes, there are certain privileged people who have access to technology, and they have traditionally, let me just check with the microphone. Okay, so they have been traditionally used to maybe threaten the craft practice in some ways. They emulate it to the point where it blurs the boundary between what is crafted and what is not, and who is actually crafting, who is not, and it becomes commercial. It enters into automated manufacturing situations. So yes, these are facts. And my whole point is that we could do better as a civilization. We might have had access to certain technologies, but maybe we really don't know what we want to do with them. We don't know how to use them. We don't have the right sensibilities to make something meaningful out of it. So we are caught in this drudgery in creating the desire, creating a demand and fulfilling it. And we go on consuming, but we feel empty. And I think that a craft intervention like this can tackle that situation, because now it's about saying, okay, we have some things and we are sorry that we kept you out of this loop, but can you please help us figure out, what to do with it, how to live, because we might have forgotten and now we recognize that what we did was wrong. So it's like it's more of an apology, I think, a project like this. And it's more about enabling a certain sector, enabling a certain sensibility to reconfigure reality, reconfigure how we live and why we live. So that's what I mean when I say it relies on the craftsperson's sensibility for guidance and places them in power as a master custodian, most ancient practitioner of technology. The exhibition serves as documentation of process, and the tech priming will ideally involve cutting-edge innovations with disruptive potential, multimedia, media, AR, VR, XR, automation, AI, ML, blockchain, quantum nanocomputing, cybernetic system design, etc. When I put these things not because they are the most cutting edge, because I have been out of touch with what cutting edge research, what cutting edge technology looks like right now. But my point is that there are ideas out there that have disrupted global ecosystems at a systems level. So it's not just about things. It's not about a particular TECHNIQUE technique, but it's really about techne. The even maybe locally it's called analogous to tantra, the method of doing something. So I'm really looking at ideas about, like if I take blockchain, for example, the idea of decentralization, the idea of even quasi supersymmetry, which you would see in quantum ideas. So I want to sort of have a primer which encapsulates these ideas, whether it's a research question, whether it's a research endeavor academically in scientific practice, whether it's coming from social sciences, whether it's coming from politics. It's more about the knowledge that has come, pack it into a primer. And of course, the problem is that this has the problematic systems of power, colonial oppression or gender-based violence, or they are coming as shadows. So when we are doing this, I feel like that's why we need to hire experts who are aware of these undesirable traits in something, and they can point it out. They can say that, okay, we have this particular knowledge system, we have this black box, but this is the shadow that comes with it and we don't want it. We don't necessarily want to correlate our technology with the historiography of technology itself. We don't want to have these parasites coming along or Trojan horsing along. So it's a very sensitive approach to priming, I think, where you're not saying that I'm the master, I'm the expert, and you're going to learn from me. It's more about conveying all we can convey where we have come as representatives of human civilization, as the anthropos, representing anthropos, saying that this is the cutting edge, this is the point, this is the ledge, this is how far we managed to come, this is what it comes with, these are the undesirable things. Now shows what you can do. So these are some technologies that have played antagonistic roles in craft historiographies. To finance such a project is a behemoth task. It's an understatement. The logistics are also incredibly complex to navigate. Designing lush and crafted lifestyles, the idyllic drip aesthetic, might emulate lived realities of royal and noblesse families. And there is considerable expenditure involved in setting up spaces for high-end computing, which is an ideal situation for AIRE, the iArts platform. It's going to manage the VR environment to make expensive actualities virtually, at least semantically accessible. So I think this is the reason, because there are a lot of open calls nowadays, and I'm just sick of it. I don't want to keep working for free, doing all of this compiling, and then suddenly it just gets rejected for no reason. So I didn't even want to risk it initially. But then when I think about the kind of potential that VR has for a prototype as K24 prototype, I think I'm just blown away. I'm just amazed, because suddenly I realized that yes, you can have gold, you can have diamonds, you can have anything that you ever wanted in a virtual environment. And yes, it's not the exactly the tangibility of it. You're sort of missing out. Even with haptics, it's not really going to be there. Maybe the smell, olfactory sensation, or just the reality of it. But if the space is immersive enough, then semantically, at least you have touched what you wanted to, the experience, you have actualized it, you have brought forth your inner desire into this material realm. And not only that, you have done it in a way that you can share it as a community, you can all participate in it. And suddenly I thought that, no, I have to submit to this open call, no matter what it takes. And I have to make a proposal that is extremely hard to reject. And I hope this is it. So of course, from the ground, you can say that the project itself would be best situated at Technics, right? But with the 3,000 euro budget and only 6 weeks, I don't think I can recruit Prime and commune and exhibit. It's not going to happen. This is a very important exhibit if you think about it. If you look at the outcome, what I would envision right now, sitting here in my chair without ever recruiting, priming, or doing anything, the kind of vision that I have is a particular community of craftspeople who have completely transformed their entire life, their clothes, their hairstyles, their bodies, their systems of living, their political structure, their operations, their systems of consumption, irrigation, what they eat, why they eat, how they eat, just what kind of technology they're using, the semiconductors that are in a circuit. It's just a complete reimagining of a lifestyle, and you can watch it. You can participate in that lifestyle. You can enter into it. And I think we would suddenly see it as a benchmark. Globally, we would say that is a lush, luxurious lifestyle, and it's sustainable, and it's crafted. That's the kind of lifestyle I want. Because right now, we're being made to chase so many kinds of desires that maybe don't even belong to us. But then the intrinsic sense of searching for meaning or searching for a certain luxury. When I say luxury, it could mean many things to different people. That's literally the point of idyllicdrip. It's not the same globally. It's not a one size fits all approach to desire. But it does acknowledge that maybe there is a descriptor of desire in which all of our conflicting desires sort of amalgamate and are able to coexist. And really, that state is what idyllicdrip means to me. It's just a word. It doesn't really, it could mean, you could call it lush, you could call it crafted, you could call it anything you want. You could use a regional language. It doesn't, or you could just use a number like 23. It's not really about the terminology for it, but just acknowledging that something like that exists. A system, a systemic global state of existence, or in quantum, a state space configuration, which represents a coexistence of all of our desires in actuality, not in some abstract sense where I'm longing, I'm yearning, but I'm experiencing, I'm being, I'm interacting, I'm manifesting, I'm engaging. It's a lived experience of idyllicdrip. So that's, sorry for the little diversion, but that's why I decided that maybe this would work better with either at Basel or at Bangalore MAP, HEK, House of Electronic Arts. And later, it would be the perfect setting to investigate Technics' idea of choreography. You should look at the website for that particular reference. All of this makes K24 too grandiose for spatial affairs. While it is K24 that addresses questions like, what are the tools of the future that we really need. How do we want to live together, etc. This is coming from the text on Mesh Festival. It's going to happen in October, and I really want to be a part of it. That's also one of the strongest reasons why I'm submitting this. Techniker's exploration of choreography between human mechanic operator and non-human machine program using XR as a mediator interface is exactly what an iteration of K24 would look like. Literally, that's what I think it will happen, but I'm not I'm not going to take any bets right now. Automated manufacturing with mechanistic productivity has vocationally displaced the craft practice, and yet in the hands of the craft community, these technologies will radically transform the reality of the crafted artifact. It's right. Just reality in general. So this project starts at this juncture. That's just the background for where it's coming from, why do I want to do it, and so on. What exactly am I tackling at this stage? My project proposal tolerates the idea that craft sensibility is universally accessible. Maybe not true, but I have to start with that. To create a reciprocity-driven narrative structure, we virtualize craft ability by allowing a user to perform a set of 4 discrete roles. Actors, like I've said. Noble, foliage, warrior, breeze. These are archetypes that I had to really mull over for a long time, because suddenly in a VR environment, possibility is endless. You were assigned a certain sex at birth. You have a certain ability, or you're differently abled, or you are by personality, by mood, they like by humor rather, in traditional, more classical terms. You have a certain temperament, but you want to explore a certain other identity, or your sentience level. You think you are the anthropos, you think you are at the top, and suddenly animistic cultures are saying, you know, that in your materialistic discourse, dialogue, flowers, the way the river moves, the way these abstract entities converge, emotions, thoughts, there is a certain intelligence, a systemic intelligence that is displayed over there. And suddenly you're questioning, what is sentience? Is sentience something that I extend to all local actors? So there are a lot of questions over here that can be tackled. So I needed to choose some actors which allowed mobility across contexts. Whether it's, I mean, already K24 wants to tackle financial economic mobility because it's really important. And over here, I also thought, why not gender mobility, social mobility in terms of youth? Maybe you're just old right now and you think about when you used to be younger. So there are certain performative capacities that you had, which you might not have right now. And vice versa. Maybe you want to see how it feels to be old. Maybe you're scared of death. So there are a lot of these questions that come up, and I wanted to concretize them into certain archetypal roles. And it's hard, right? I can't just go into a VR environment in new space saying, okay, I want 20 actors, I want 16 actors, because that was the thought initially. I had about 16, brought it down to 8, and now I was like, okay, 4. Actually, there were 5, but then I realized even that is too much, because if I had 5 MetaQuest, then each of them at $500, suddenly the €3,000 budget is not going to be feasible. And even just to develop this, I need at least 2 headsets. So I was thinking, okay, we need to really bring it down. And these are the crystallized actors, so to speak. In the open call, they asked for a channel for artistic activity, and this is something that I address. This is how it started. I did not come up with actors initially. I was thinking about, okay, a channel for artistic activity that transcends context is best realized through mundane everyday situations because it's the common context. Each actor must be archetypally primal and full of particularities that generalize to the field of desires we collectively inhabit. Because I'm looking for collective desiderata. It's not something that is expressed on the daily, but it's recognized, we acknowledge that it's primal to each actor, each user, each being. So what can be archetypally primal and full of particularities that generalize to the field of desires that we collectively inhabit. XR makes mobility, socioeconomic, gender, age, sentience level, etc., accessible to users. I have attributed the role of an hot aesthete to the noble who crafts the reality. When I say reality, I mean post-Gaia habitat. Of course, there's this idea of Gaia. There are ideas of localized houses. But when I think about consciousness itself, I'm really looking at a delocalized or non-local form of existence. And what I mean is that it doesn't all have to exist all at the same time. Nothing, I'm talking about the very real energy exchanges of touching something, of sitting on something, a certain stability in the nature of existence, in the ontology or in the thingness itself. I realized that that's not a sufficient case. That's almost a maximalist approach to ontology, which made me think about habitat in general. If I'm situated here and my presence is delocalized in the sense that if I'm really intensely looking at a twig, a branch, a leaf, then am I in my body or am I at that particular location of looking? If I'm really listening to a song and I'm immersed into it, then have I entered the soundscape? Is there any physicality to me at all? And a lot of these are coming from the phenomenology of dreams itself, where nothing is really local in any sense of that term, but it can have local-like properties. So I started thinking about what a habitat would actually mean. Why would I situate my awareness in something, like a globe or even Gaia, for example? It's not just about having a certain space, inhabiting a certain space, but actually being that certain space, being the set of experiences that evolve to formulate what you call that space. So it's about those moments of interaction. And that's when I thought that a habitat could be an interesting idea, where if I take the body and I take the environment, I take anything tangible, anything physical, and I say that that is the habitat, that is the zone of or performative action, the sphere of performative action for any agent, any user, any being. And the counterpart to habitat would be avatar. And when you find the Miro board that I have made, a lot of the more technical, more rigorous aspects of my research come through over there. But for now, it's not really important. What's important is that they customize the habitat, which means the entire space that any actor can experience. They customize their avatar with I've used MQ3 because MetaQuest 3. MQ3 is mirror view and occupy, interact within a private residence designated Heimat. This came from my engagement with critical zones at Science Gallery, Bengaluru. I thought that's a very beautiful word. And I started understanding the nuances of the meaning, and suddenly home or location, residence, castle, they all seem to fall flat. And they're able to exeunt. And I'm not exactly insisting on using these particular terms, but this is how I saw it in the vision when I was conceptualizing everything. And I'd like to retain those aspects because I do believe that there's a reason why certain things are the way they are. And that makes me idiosyncratic in my choice. They're able to exeunt the Heimat using AIRE's feature of lowering walls. When I was looking at IR's AIRE, I noticed that they enter this particular test room, an apartment, and the user through hand tracking is able to lower the walls and expose themselves to the environment. And that made me think, yes, if you had this private residence and with the MetaQuest 3, I set a manual boundary around it, then it's invisible. Suddenly when the noble actor raises down the walls, like bringing down the inner walls itself of personality, making them socially accessible to all the other actors, then suddenly they're seen. They're not necessarily isolated or alienated. So it made me think about choice, about power of self-representation, about alienation, isolation that comes with these lifestyles. And Right. So the privacy of the noble, exploiting manual boundary setting, represents alienation, loneliness, and isolation, being ignored, and the power of choice through self-representation, while the crafting of avatar to suit sensibilities indicates a certain anticipation in terms of the social presence they cultivate, how and when they would like to be seen. So I'm crafting my avatar. I'm putting on makeup. I'm, wearing these clothes. I'm looking at myself. I'm admiring myself, etc. And of course, it's a very personal moment, but without the anticipation of social interaction, it might not mean everything. Because when I think about why do I do this, when I want to represent myself to the other who I've already othered, and suddenly I thought, yeah, there is a certain anticipation over here that is central to this crafting. The noble is also tasked, noblesse oblige, with setting the aesthetics of occluded environment. They choose from a small list of travel destinations like NYC, Shanghai, Paris, Bali, anywhere in Italy also. It's not exactly, I'm not focused on the exact location. This final exhibition might happen at Platz. And I'm thinking, yeah, you have an occluded environment. I want something iconic. If I was in Paris, then I would say, okay, I want the Eiffel Tower. It's very cliche, cringe, I know that, but it's also very iconic. I can't help it. Because if I think about accessibility, socioeconomic, then I think travel features on top of many people's list, among the youth especially. So when I take this perspective, then I think, yes, the noble has to have the right to um, travel wherever they want, but it also comes with a responsibility because every actor sort of understands. There is an implicit understanding that the user performing the noble actor is the one setting the aesthetics. So if you don't like it, it's their fault. If you like it, it's to them, and they are obligated to set a scenic location, which not only agrees with their taste, but also through social dynamics, um, conforms to the tastes of all the users. So there is this essential aspect of nobility that I think contemporary H&I lifestyles sort of bypass or forget. The obligation that comes with being in a position of financial power and privilege, there are certain duties that you perform. So I think it's also harkening back to that idea. It's questioning that. And yeah, I'm sorry that I'm speaking so much, but I decided that if I'm going to make a video, then I might as well do a proper one. So my idea is also each destination comes with a soundscape accessible to all users. It's a it's a brute forcing of occlusion and sound. It's a brute forcing of visual and environment and the virtual asset. Everybody has to put up with the choices of the noble actor. And the noble actor actually remains invisible to all these users until they lower down the walls to feature. They suddenly see these are choices I made. How does everybody feel about it? It's a very introspective moment, so to speak. If AIRE is able to work with AI models, image to 3D like TripOSR or text to 3D alternatives to augment 3D assets and invoke them into the virtual environment, the user is able to enjoy a more meaningful experience. Carry back theory of meaning in narratives. So when I first came across this theory, I thought that makes perfect sense. I enter a story, I enter a narrative, I enter a framework, and then causally, through causality, I have um, exited. It's over. It's just a memory. It's no longer something that I consciously necessarily think of as part of real life again. I reminisce about it. What did I take away? If this was just a carrier bag, then what did I create? What did I crystallize in that crucible? And what am I walking away with? And I really thought that some of these AI models that exist right now, Stability AI, TripOSR, for example, I was just playing with it. Of course, it can't generate a great 3D asset, but it generates something. And at least in this context, something was better than nothing. There has to be moderator so that you generate something socially acceptable in that context, I think. Otherwise, things could get very complicated. But I thought, you have these actors in the virtual environment, but what if you just uploaded an image and then you invoke that 3D asset at the particular location? Because the 3D asset is already generated by AI. All you have to do is find a way to implement that mesh, even as just a .obj file. It doesn't have to be colored, right? Just implement that mesh into the virtual environment. So I thought that would be interesting, but I'm not sure if AIRE can manage that right now. There are complexities related to it, but I just thought if it's possible, then the user has a real connect with the exhibit. Otherwise, they've come into it and exited. But if this happens, then they've really participated, if you know what I mean. They've taken something back to show, to publicize. The next actor, the warrior, represents a primal urge to protect, sustain, survive, and fight. This is coming from my own understanding of physicality, this embodied experience of pushing yourself to a certain limit, exercising, yogasana, and even martial art, combat. And the idea of stereotypically associated to male aggression. So I thought that, okay, if you have a noble who everybody, you think that I'm just going to dress up, I'm going to look flab, I'm going to look, I'm just going to rizz it up, I'm going to do these things and appear a certain way and present myself, then why should I also not take a stand, hit, punch, kick, bleed, feel the extremes of the spectrum on gender identities? Because if you are going to, for example, I identify as non-binary, or I'm actually anti-gender. Without any other choices, I have to take the excluded middle over here. But if I'm going to occupy that entire spectrum, why not taste these idealized stereotypical extremes? And it's not to say that there aren't warriors who identified as female or nobles who were dandy, so to speak. But I realize some of the things I'm saying are problematic, but if I come from a position within a certain community, then I'm not speaking for everyone. Let's just say that. I'm talking from my own experiences. So I wanted to make this role and actor accessible because I think that is very important when I think about power, politics, war, aggression, and I think about very problematic topics like mob lynchings, and think about how just violence perpetuates violence and how it's used to control, but how it's also always been an essential aspect of lived realities. It's a very confusing topic for me because I want to be stronger. If there was infrastructure that I could wreck, I want to take out my frustration, I want to take out my rage, but I want to do it in a socially acceptable way because it's not about showing you how strong I am, or it's not about trying to beat you down or trying to intimidate you. It's just a very personal thing about I want to be stronger than I was yesterday, a little bit. I want to practice. It's coming from practice, not malice. So I decided to integrate this character as another central figure. And the involvement with foliage is where it gets interesting because this warrior is not, when I think about my own boyhood and I enter into that framework, into that position, and I picture the aspects of the warrior, then there aren't any choices. If I really think about it, it's a very deterministic system. The feeling of choice, the clarity of an event happening, some unraveling, some unfolding, it's very immediate. It's system. It's a code of conduct. It's a, like, I don't want to invoke Bushido, but I'm thinking there is a certain role, a certain identity that you have decided to stick with. You're staying with it. You've crystallized it. You fixed it as a set of rules and you don't break it. You don't follow it. You operate by that code and it becomes your way of life. So that is represented in the warrior patrolling foliage locations. It's not that the warrior can go anywhere. It's not in a locomotive sense. The warrior is not mobile. The warrior is not static as foliage, for example, just created, instantiated at one position and has to stay there until its temporal existence decays. But the warrior patrols those locations, and warrior has only two choices. If there is infrastructure, then I wreck it. If there's an actor, then I bow. I greet. I say, it's not practice. I'm just practicing. There's no malice coming from me. So it's a very deterministic system without many choices. But the internal structure of it, the internalities, the subjective experience of being there, that's just crazy, right? You're doing from a very fixed set of possibilities. Your situation is just going to recur again and again and again. That's your entire archetypal life. But your internal experience of these, the contemplations, the clarity, the realizations, the inquiries you posit, they're off the charts. So I think I wanted to highlight that aspect through the warrior. Their dilemma is succinctly captured in the idea of practice, not malice, as they wreck infrastructure and bow to actors. Key terms that I just used. The bowing is a greeting, user-performed interaction with other users, and the wrecking, home invasion VR game-style shattering of virtual signposts, for example, are deterministically dependent on context. To further constrain the locomotive ability of the warrior, this actor can only be accessed and maintained by patrolling one foliage location to the other. So it's really a system of actors based on location information of the headset. Where are you? And what roles are possible for you to access based on your location in space. I should probably add this as a line somewhere. I've already written too much. I'm afraid it's text heavy, but I'm trying my best. This essentially means that all foliage locations vertices have lines, location data connecting vertices that the warrior lies on. We use visual arrows and Feli. They have a particular virtual sphere or assistant. And I think it's very helpful because if I am differently abled, if I require certain accessibility structures, then having multiple modalities to perform this role is certainly a plus point. So yes, I would like to be guided by this, all-wise, knowing spirit, but I also want to see visual arrows around me saying that's the foliage location I'm at. That's the foliage location which is around me, and I need to take this path. So I just follow the arrows and I'm going along this path. And whatever happens, que sera sera. We use visual arrows and Feli virtual sphere to lead the warrior along predetermined configured pathways and expose the carnage and humor in a lifestyle of limited choices. The warrior's wrecking may be an animated sequence built on motion capture data, martial art performed by me. So of course, if the warrior's kicking something and punching something, then I was thinking, yeah, you can have AI generated animation sequences. You can hand draw them, you can animate them, motion graphics are available. But if I want to enter into this K24 prototype as an artist, why not do it on my own? If I had motion sensors like Vive, I saw that the Vive tracker was actually quite helpful and they had a good deal, I think, in terms of the financial acquisition of tech. And I also thought I don't really need it forever, right? I need it. I can use it for this project and I can give it to whoever is housing me. If I'm at HEK Basel, then they probably won't need it because I suspect they would have better trackers with them. But if I'm at Map Bengaluru, for example, I'm sure that they don't have Vive yet, and I could just give this tech to them. So it's part of the budget. I am procuring it, but I'm using it and giving it right back to you. So I thought that that's an additional benefit because I really want this project. It's not about me making some money, me taking some tech. I need to see this happen. So whatever works, right? Whatever I was thinking. And as a practitioner, as an early, very novice, nascent, I shouldn't even say that. I'm just starting martial art in some format. I thought if I perform the warrior, if I perform the breeze and we had animated sequences, that would be a way for me to really immerse. Otherwise, I've just sat with the concept, but here I'm going to embody those things. And that's a very real inquiry that I want to do if it's allowed, if I'm able to, if the technical system can handle it computationally and logistically, of course. The foliage is the complex entity, and this form of sentience, from photochemical phenomena, fungal mesh networks, etc., acts as a distributed intelligence. They not only communicate with each other, localizations, but also access a common sensory organ. So, of course, when I look at Technica's work, I realize that they're looking at non-human entities in a very mechanistic way. And when I think about non-human entities, I feel very closely related to plants, animals, and I'm not talking about the natural system or the ecosystem as something disparate from my own presence. And I've been drawn to this idea of forests, just living there. And I've tried it out for a bit, like just pilot tested it and just gone wild, to put it in that way. And what I learned from that lifestyle is it's not hard, it's not easy to put into words. It's very hard, but it's not hard to experience. Everybody does, I think, feel a connect. So when I started really thinking about what kind of non-humans do I want to involve as actors, then I thought, yes, I need something like breeze. But I thought foliage was extremely important because it's a plant. On one hand, a warrior patrolling this represents an eco-warrior kind of resolution where you're fighting for the plant. And for me, the mundane aspect of just watching a breeze ruffle the leaves of a plant, that became very particular. It is full of uncanny flavor from maybe Gestalt theory. It became the foreground. It just came to me and said, look, this is something I've seen over the years. If I'm in a rush, if I'm drinking coffee, if I'm running from one place to another, I'm trying to commute, I'm stuck with so many deadlines, I'm stressed, or I'm just swimming someday. No matter what the context was, how emotionally charged I was, there was this recurring, just ongoing phenomena. And I did not necessarily take it for granted. I look at it, I acknowledge it. There was a moment of respite over there. And when I think about idyllic trip, the idyllic aspect was very much there in that interaction. All I needed to do was drip it up, so to speak. So then I started thinking about how foliage, when I look at certain keepsakes, there are these bonsai plants, maybe made in gold, maybe they have jade, maybe they have crystal. It's the year of the dragon. So I'm really going heavy with those aesthetics. And I thought, yes, if you had the user design foliage and they could play with the material properties instead of just leaves and branches, they had access to material properties like crystal, fabric. When I talk about fabric, I think Kashmir. When I talk about wood, I think mahogany. I'm just trying to really enter that certain sensibility, those lifestyles. So I thought if you have crystal and you put a hue of golden, lavish golden hue, then you have made gold in the virtual environment. You don't have to have a material called gold. You could play with the material property, just ray tracing information, how it handles light, and how the texture. And this is not that complex also. It's just a visual creation system. It's just mesh edits, which you already have. You can just draw stuff already. So all you need to do is with the hue, the kind of marker that you're using varies across material properties. And you don't even need that many. I maybe would use earthy clay, a certain eco sensibility, and crystal, so that you could have rubies, you could have emeralds, you could have jade, traditional traditional acquisitory items, and the minerals, basically minerals. And of course, you don't want to mine all of it out of the earth, but maybe you want to see what it feels like to have it, in case somebody decides to mine the asteroid belts at some point, if the earth is not able to get it and you still want it, and that it has to be a way for you to get it. And theoretically, I think that's one of the most logical solutions. So yeah, fabric, earth, and crystal, something like that. And I really needed to conceptualize foliage in a way that Unity can do it. You don't want a generative foliage, which is just too much information. You don't want Lindenmayer systems to go crazy like that, because computationally that becomes expensive, and that's not necessarily what you're going for. You just need a representation of foliage. So I thought about atomic orbitals and how in chemistry they visualize just spheres and a cylinder, a tubular cylinder, and that's sufficient, right? If you have a cylinder and then you have a cylinder and then you just keep branching it, all you need to do is play with the parameters of the cylinder itself, how long it has to be, and you have branching patterns. And because of the branching pattern you've created, you already have nodes. So the cylinder volumes are location information, the nodes are location information, and where you place the foliage, that's also location information. Since AIRE is based on location tracking, I thought convert all of these actors, all of these abstract ideas to very concrete location data. What is the location at which what needs to happen? And that's basically our virtual environment. That is our system. So I thought, okay, you just need cylinders. So that's very simple. You have the branching patterns. At the node, you allow the application of texture. That's your foliage. So when the breeze comes towards the foliage, they ruffle those textures and get to be breeze longer. I'll come back to this. The warrior patrols the foliage locations based on where it has. I've been thinking that it needs a form of persistency. You don't want the foliage to be there eternally fixed, but you don't want it to just keep on disappearing either. It should not become overpopulated, but there has to be at least a few foliage locations so that the warrior has something to patrol. So this is something I will talk about. The most interesting aspect of this sentience is that the root networks, right? One foliage location, although it appears disparate from another location, it's not disparate. They're communicating. They're in synchronous state of existence. They coexist as the same organism. So they have individual localizations for sure, but the sensory information, maybe the ontological position of the plant is very different from a human in some ways. So I thought I need to make that accessible. And I immediately thought, you have a foliage location, you have another location, you have another location. At all of these location datas, there are many aspects of the VR environment itself. Through the headsets, you have views, you have audio information. Why not, have a foliage network that the user enters, and as soon as they enter, they receive this audiovisual information from all foliage locations. So it's a very non-exclusive footage. It's not about where are you based, which foliage location. It's about entering into this network and getting the feed from all these locations at the same time. It can be overwhelming. It can sound like a cacophony, and you might think, wow, this is a bit disorienting. But it also gives you insight into this form of existence, that it's interconnected. I'm getting visual feed. I'm getting audio from 10 feet away, from 20 feet away, and right here, 2 feet away, 1 feet away, 1 foot away. So I'm getting all of this information. I don't really know where it goes what. So I thought about the insect eye. When you look at a housefly's eyes, usually when I think about panels, you think static, rectangular frames and you're getting all of these visuals, like a CCTV camera footage monitoring. But then I also wanted to give a shout out to Buckminster Fullerene, who prefers the hexagonal grid. And I thought either have an organic system of arranging panels or at least a hexagonal one. If it's entirely impossible, then we can settle for the rectangular and the square format. But I thought we need to freshen it up a bit. You need to liven it up a bit. You cannot say this is the same as looking at the CCTV footage. There is something different here. So I needed that emphasis. But also access the common sensory organ. The user may confirm UI supported action for the prompt, access foliage network, confirm. Whereupon they receive a feed of audio, video, audio-visual information in multi-panel format, similar to insect eye space-filling monitors. The cacophony of information allows users to access a relatively rooted and spatiotemporally static modality of existence. It's not like the plant or the foliage is staying there forever. It does have its own kind of movement, its own dynamic, but in a relative context, the spatiotemporally static nature comes through. Foliage consists of cylinders as connectors, branches, and textures, visual mesh edit. The connectors may be used for branching L systems, and location data at nodes allow application of texture, so the user customizes hue and material property, just visual creation tools. Foliage is reminiscent of personal memorabilia like bonsai or luxury artifact creation, designer, acquisition, ice, display, flex. To tap into AIRE's capabilities, we use foliage for financial mobility by combining hue choice with material properties like crystal, cashmere fabric, fine earthy clay, grand mahogany, etc. to customize foliage textures. This is a new materialistic inquiry into the aesthetics of matter and material, and the iterations capture our desire, what we want to see, keep, and cherish. The reincarnations of foliage actors, over time, are cathartically perfect for documenting these finally realized desires. If I really think about K24, then I think foliage is very important, one of the most important actors, if not the most, because it's really giving you that opportunity to play with materials that you don't have access to necessarily. You know, maybe there is a gold earring lying somewhere, but I don't touch it. It might be a wedding gift or something. It's a memorabilia. It's part of heritage. It's part of tradition. I don't use it. It's expensive china, maybe somewhere. I'm not talking about me, but theoretically, if there is something accessible, it's not accessible to me at all as a particular inhabitant of a household. There might be these things, but we are not allowed to play with them or reach out for them, let alone show each other what we can do with them. We're not allowed to craft them. You can't just take rubies and jewels and just keep taking and taking and taking and then put it together. I don't like it. I just discard it, take some more, put it. Not everybody necessarily has that privilege. But with virtual reality, you do access that lifestyle for a bit in some capacity. So I think this actor is extremely important. And what we do with foliage, the kind of foliage that we create and display and show each other, it's a very important document. It really conveys to each other what our aesthetic sensibilities are. Ideally, we would have a plurality of material textures. We don't want to limit ourselves to a certain set, a certain colonial idea of what exotic item is, what a luxurious item is. We don't want that. We want to see what we find meaningful, what we think of as luxury. We want to really inquire into it. But we are working with a platform. We are working with a limited budget. We are working with many constraints. So we really need to choose our materials carefully. And if nobody is able to choose, then I will choose, because as an artist, I do have that idiosyncratic privilege to say, this is what I think we have to do. Because in the end, the project has to happen. Breeze is set as the default actor. You enter the space, you are Breeze. You have a timer, and you have to go ruffle foliage before the timer ends. If you don't, then you're not really part of the exhibit. You are not breeze anymore. And I'll explain to you what being breeze really means. So of course, when I think of breeze, I want to wade through the space. If I've become breeze, then I want to really enact that role. I just don't want to walk as breeze, but I could do that too, because breeze has velocity, breeze has directionality. It has all of these peculiar aspects and organicity. The sentience which I was talking about, um, you have a very organic nature to how breeze moves as well. So breeze is set as the default actor for any user. It is idyllic in nature and restful yet energetic. Breeze has a timer and needs to refill earn time by ruffling foliage. So it's just an action. You go towards the foliage and it says, oh, you are ruffling. It's location-based access. Ruffling foliage, a mundanely beautiful phenomena and joyfully gamified moment of respite. We allow breeze to customize, self-represent hue. I was initially thinking fix the breeze to pink yellow gradients because that's the brand that I have. Yellow and pink are my colors. But then I thought, okay, it's not computationally heavy. It's not very costly to allow that little bit of self-representation. I do want to maintain a glittery haze, a certain aesthetic of breeze, because you want presence, but you don't want the visibility of the user. You want to know that there is breeze because you don't want to crash into them. You want to be able to enter into a new virtual social dynamics of moving in a space, of interacting, of talking to each other, of acknowledging each other, of getting out of the way as well. So you want that an exploration of new dynamics. So you really need to have a strong indicator of presence. You can't have transparent breeze right now because it will be kind of difficult, I think. We allow breeze to customize, self-represent hue. The peculiarity of smoke, haze, cloud, and fume, intangibility, amorphous, formless, flowing, is conveyed by hiding the presence of the user and avatar. The breeze is seen by actors, or not seen. The breeze is seen by actors as a glittery haze, concentrated around location information of the user. So it's basically, I have an avatar, but when you have the MetaQuest 3, you see even physical bodies moving around, you see them in the virtual environment. So we need a way to brute force that into using AIRE to force the breeze actors to not be seen as themselves, but as an avatar, which is just a glittery haze. You have maybe a silhouette at the maximum, you can have a silhouette of the body, but we don't want the body to be seen itself. We want that invisibility. We want a hidden presence. We want something to be masked, and we want it to be discreet, covert. So it gives that sense of freedom. It gives you that space to act the way you want, to wear the expressions you want. So there's a lot of possibility there because you want to signify freedom, right? It's concentrated around the location information of the user. We don't need high-end fluid dynamics or ray tracing to access this form of sentience, as acknowledged in animistic cultures, but the organicity of the user extends agency and freedom, classical signifiers of sentience, to the notion of breeze itself. Initially, I thought, why not constrain the breeze also like the warrior? Because you have, if you have ray tracing algorithms and you have some fluid dynamics, then depending on the structure, because if you have the noble's heimat with the walls, then the breeze is not allowed to enter because it's set as the boundary. If you have the boundary in a virtual environment, then outside the boundary it doesn't work. You're out of the exhibit. Similarly, if the breeze enters the heimat, they're not in the exhibit. So you have this wall, so why not use fluid dynamics to simulate the path of the breeze? Then I really begin thinking, why? That's a computational complexity that we don't need because we have intelligence, right? You can outsource that complexity. You can say, this is the Hamath, don't enter, just don't. And the breeze moves. So there is a more organic nature. And when I think about sentience, maybe not everybody thinks of sentience in the same way. So that self-organizing system of breeze became important to me from an animistic perspective, where these are forces of nature, but they are also very much sentient. And I was thinking, yep, this has to be the default actor. And the timer is there to ensure a periodical ruffling of foliage as it's like a commercial hub, it's like a social hub, a space for coming together and interacting. You see another actor, maybe a warrior has come, they bow to the breeze, and a lot of stuff is happening around the foliage. So you have that particular node, a particular location where there is a periodic interactivity among users. I'm not talking about, uh, yeah, inter-user activity. Again, I have to apologize for speaking so much, but we're going to get through this. We expect users to dance and wade through the space breezily while ruffling foliage. Breezing through the space. While the warrior lies strictly on the line between one foliage location and another, breeze is temporarily bound to foliage locations, returning periodically to continue the masked meandering. Thank you. My proposal involves these four actors, and the emergent reality also involves sound, immersed across locations or space itself, which is an omnipotent but implicit actor. Let me tell you, my initial idea was the foliage locations are at certain spaces, and there is a soundscape because the noble in the Heimat has set the habitat to, let's say, Paris, or Shanghai, somewhere. You have a soundscape permeating the space. All the actors, all the users in the environment are able to hear it. That's the characteristic of the action performed by Noble. But you have people as well. You have our VR headset picking up audio. They are speaking, they are interacting. Someone is shouting. Maybe a young child is crying or laughing, and maybe a dog is barking. Maybe there are birds tweeting. There are the very real localizations of sound clusters in different areas. So I thought, why not have the foliage network access like this? If a user makes a sound, like maybe, yeah, they say a particular sound, then they access the foliage location. And the sound that the user makes is picked up by the VR headset. And when the warrior wrecks infrastructure, that's the sound the warrior makes. So you get it. It's in this network, the reciprocity is insane. It's extremely strong because the input for the foliage is the output for the warrior. And I thought, why not, have the warrior move in a certain way, and that movement is seen by users as the breeze. So the location information of the warrior is location information of breeze. So I was really trying to entangle these different so I was trying to entangle these actors. Okay, I guess that's one of my cues. The Zoom keeps ending, I think, because I'm passing the limit or something. But then I realized it was too complex. If no one's making a sound, does that mean there's no warrior? If the warrior is not patrolling, does that mean there's no breeze? So then I realized by entangling them entirely, it was too complex for me to handle on my own. And that's why I started making them a little more separated. But ideally, if this is the prototype, then if you want to enter into a new realm of reciprocity, then we should be entangling this information. So there are these particular soundscapes, and I really mean for this to happen, but it's not easy. It's not feasible. Let's just say that, yeah, because feasibility is also one of the criteria for selecting this project. And keeping feasibility in mind, this was just not feasible right now. So I was thinking, yeah, we can't do that. But in that situation, the sound would be the fifth actor. That's what I mean when I say sound, I think of sound as homotopy to space itself, because sound has a spatial quality to it, and that's one of my research projects that I'm working on. I will show it to you in a bit. My proposal involves these four actors, and the emergent reality also involves sound immersed across locations or space itself, which is an omnipotent but implicit actor. To bypass the unavoidable expenditures related to archiving, we tap into MQ3's screen grab ability to encourage social media use as people's archive, documentation, collective memory. If the carrier back theory of meaning still holds, and you can't invoke AI generated 3D artifacts into your virtual environment, or for some reason you don't want to, because that's a headache in administrative context to manage that, to oversee that, to ensure that it's being safely used. It's a problem. So then you could just allow people to take screenshots, and I don't want to store it on my hard drive, or I don't want to have a cloud storage for it, because again, that's another expenditure. But of course, I can leverage social media. I can encourage people to share it with a particular hashtag so that people have an archive of this experience, and we get publicity for the exhibit. So there are pros and cons to both approaches, but this was cheaper and more effective. So I thought, yeah, it's take screen grabs, screenshots, and video clips. And we have to negotiate the aspect of consent over there. Who are the actors who want to be, documented, who don't? Why not? That's not really important, but basically there's that aspect of monitoring. So I realized that we must have some moderators and accessibility support on site to ensure smooth running, because you never know what kind of users and agents want to experience this exhibit. And it would be a real shame, because we did not think one little thought someone could not experience it. That's terrible. So if you can think about a few things about how you can make this accessible, how you can ensure that this is a safe space for all users, then we should be doing that. And I think it's very important to have some budget for it, some thought for it, some space and time, some energy put into that perspective. I'm also tired from speaking, and I bet you're tired of listening to this. So I will just quickly take you through this proposal. I won't read out. Should I read out everything? Not really, but basically what I want to do is also say that, I'm a risky option. There are people I know, specifically maybe 3 people, who are more equipped than me to do this project. They couldn't maybe conceptualize such a project, but whatever they have conceptualized, they have previously done work in XR, AR, VR to show that they're capable. They have entered this ecosystem, and I don't know if they're thriving, but they are managing. They have showcased projects, and they will continue to do so. With all that in mind, why me? Because I'm a risky option, right? So I wanted to just USP myself. I will thrive autonomously in a complex technical environment. I need support, but even if there's no support, there will be artistic output. That's something that I can guarantee. No matter what the case, no matter what my situation is, I'm always going to be making that art with the same consistent vision, coherent in my speculative framework, within my epistemology, within the environment and system of meanings that I've constructed. There's always going to be artistic output, because it's a world of its own that has come into being, and it's always going to be there. We can talk more about this during the workshop itself, or during the residency itself, because I do have a lot to share about where I come from and why I do what I do. So I will thrive autonomously in a complex technical environment. I've made electronic circuits and worked with semiconductors since I was 12. That's actually not entirely true. I have worked at 12, maybe 13, 14, 15, all the way up to 16. But after that, I lost interest in that form of technology, so to speak. So I have a history in it, but I haven't done it for a while. And there are reasons to it, financial situation also being some aspect of it. I used to open up machines and tinker until I found I'm using affordances. Taking a phone, bringing it back to life, using the screen as just different ways to look at scrap tech. I utilize sensors and moving parts in my visual art in the technoetic spirit. When I say sensors, I mean very basic things like just, oh, the water level comes, now it's conducting. Touch sensor, basically completing a circuit, and of course LDRs and sound audio sensors like clap switches. So very basic stuff. And I haven't actually explored Arduino Raspberry Pi as much as I like to. Just simple like black line following. They're very, yeah, they're basic. I was an early adopter of computational approaches and learned basic coding as part of my curriculum. See, I can't code in Python, Kali Linux, or anything like that. I use a very basic Windows system again. So, but I do understand algorithmic thinking because I have been trained in that for a bit and I come from that space. So I do know how to write an algorithm. I have studied coding because it was part of my curriculum, but I'm not an expert at it because I have been exposed to really good coders and I know where I stand. I'm I'm nothing. I'm nobody compared to that. So, but I understand it. That means I can talk to someone who's coding across levels. I don't just need to say it at a high level. I can explore libraries on my own. I can find certain modules, certain tools to suit our purposes. That much I can do. And I did some machine learning, Octave. That was just a Coursera thing that I did when I was bored. Just regression and supervised learning. But it was very soon. As soon as it hit the online interface, I was there because I want to be where technology is. I look at myself as a student of possibility. If something is possible, I need to know what is possible. I need to know how. And I'm always in that zone. Not necessarily that I have to do those things. I just need to know how it's possible and I need to understand. I need to work through the logistics of making it possible. And a lot of these people do say learning by doing is the best way, but I don't necessarily do everything on my own. I like to think and I like to be in that space of, because a lot of things that I want to do, I don't have access to it. It's just that simple. What I really want to do, it's not in my hands right now. I did some ML as soon as I could and ran AI models locally, Hugging Face, Mistral, diffusers, etc. recently. Again, I'm just mentioning this because whenever there's a technological development, I was late to AI. I thought AI would die down by now, but it's still taking off. I'm really interested in moist media, about biocomputing and technoethics, about integrating different forms of intelligence into our systems of computing. So even quantum is not that appealing to me right now, but nano to a certain extent, I think I see a lot of potential there. But I just mentioned this because there are some technical complexities to running an AI model. Of course, I was using ChatGPT. I never got to use DALI. But I thought, why stick here? And I did interact with somebody and they told me about Hugging Face. And then I looked up and I saw that there were all of these open source models and the real innovative AI was here. Like really fine-tuned models to do what I wanted. And I started trying to run them on my system. It was a nightmare because my system can't handle that much, the bigger models especially. But I was able to glean some information. I was able to understand how maybe Mistral is different from ChatGPT, how there are certain, like for mathematics, there are better AI. ChatGPT makes so many mistakes, but an open source one which is fine-tuned for math, it was so much better than it outperformed it, in my opinion, outperformed ChatGPT. So I was thinking, okay, there are these local models, and I'm not a Linux user. I had to set up that environment and figure it out. And it took me a couple of days to even get the models to run. But I did it, and I'm proud of it because I'm not tech savvy in that sense. So I'm just trying to say that, if there's a technical environment, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the field is. It doesn't matter what the language is. It doesn't matter how dense the material is. I can go through it. I can understand it, and I can talk in that term. And within a few sparks of engagement, I can be who I am at some level of expertise. I've cultivated that consciousness, that sensibility to enter into these environments and come out as a part of them, as a contributor. They require that you have some familiarity with XR, AR, VR, which I do not. I have not developed anything in Unity. I have not used the meta head. That's not technically true. I've not used for my personal projects. I've interacted with other people's exhibit. And at Science Gallery, there was this workshop on how to do 3D visualizations, how to do data sonification. And I've spent many hours with the same exhibit in which you do put on the headset and you do go through the nanostructure of carbon. And I have explored, okay, what are these colors standing for? These are, if there are deficiencies in this carbon structure, then what is the algorithm that's generating this? Is this a dynamic one or is it a static video loop? So I have explored these questions with the researchers, with the creators, and that's the level of interaction I've had with real XR, VR, AR tech. There's also at Bangalore Creative Circus, there was a Lost in Bangalore exhibit using a lot of these new media technologies, which I didn't attend, but I did look at the social media and that's what I got. Then I've been reading a lot about XR, VR, AR. I think NYU Shanghai had a course on it, and I went through a lot of it to understand the terminology, to understand the affordances and the capacities. But also because of my engagement with technoetics over the years, with techniques in general, I'm very well poised to talk about this, to philosophize about it, and to think about it, to know where it's headed, to know what it can do, to know why we should do certain things, the ethics of it, technoethics, for example. So um, that's about it. But I have, if you want to really know whether I have any engagement, then yes, there was a workshop to visualize nanoscale atomic structures and dynamic electrochemical interactions. I guess that's just fancy way of saying how they used VR and AR for chemistry research, but also chemistry pedagogy, I think, to teach everybody how this works. And the researchers did bring their 3D printed models, which I held, which I drew, which I surveyed, and tried to understand how this was generated, the algorithms behind it. That's my foot in to XR, VR, AR, and I really want to go deeper, and that's why I need this exhibit, because I'll get back to this in a bit. I use data sonification visualization for my research project. It's at the intersection of aesthetics and data. Music is number and proportion on the spatial quality of sound. And employ generative methods to make my art, especially empirical physical computing. With a penchant for pure math, I developed ontological tools to articulate properties of consciousness. I have breached knowledge across disciplines and have equipped myself to navigate technicalities across performance skill requirements with knowledge specializations with some expertise. What I mean by this is, when you talk about a complex technical environment, maybe I would either say, do I have the skills for it in a performative context? Can I draw a straight line, for example? Can I use a power tool to make a neat cut? Can I do these things? And on the other hand, if I enter maybe something like Hegel's aesthetics, can I use, or maybe even rasa theory, can I use these terminologies? Do I know what they mean? If I look at category theory, and I'm looking at all of these complex terms that mean very specific things, do I have enough maturity to access them? Have I engaged with them over the years to know what they mean? Is there a knowledge mystification that I cannot breach? So these are the two aspects that hinder me from, being in a complex technical environment to thriving in it. And I feel like I have over the years dealt with both. It sounds like a brag, but it is what it is. I wanted to be here and now I'm here. Yeah, from the Grund, one can surmise two things. It will be genuinely surprising to find a thinker better equipped to deal with questions about techniques. Really, honestly, this is how I feel. And I'm happy to be proven wrong. If I do find somebody better than me equipped to deal with these questions, then I have a bosom friend over there. I have somebody to talk to. I have somebody to engage with. It will be really nice to find an intellect, whatever. The second thing is the research I conduct is unprecedentedly novel, promising high quality report outputs. Why do I say this? It's because not that nobody has ever attacked the questions about consciousness in a speculative manner, or they haven't used mathematical notation, the mathematical realism, structuralism. There are all of these movements that have tried to formalize life itself. They have tried to do that, similar to what I'm doing. I guess why it's unprecedented and novel is because it's not distinct from artistic practice, right? You have all of this knowledge that you've generated, but how are you going to disseminate it? How is the mass? How is the public? How is, like, if, for example, when I was 11 years old, if someone gave me my work, I would understand it because I have a system of myths and metaphors to manage these narratives. Knowledge management system. That's what my art does to my research. It manages all of these knowledge and it can create these narratives. It's an evolving culture. So that's why it's unprecedented, because no one has done it in this way, in this very particular way. And when you look at what happened with postmodernism after pataphysics and yellowism, it's a very problematic movement for me. When I look at yellowism, everything is yellow, blah, blah, blah. And they go and vandalize Rothko. But what I was really interested in is the um, theological aspect of it, about unifying everything into one entity. You can call it God. If I read a lot of sacred texts, then eventually the idea that they're coming is that we're all the same, and it all leads to me because I'm God. And I really thought about it from a category theory context, about how everything can have a certain idea of sameness, but it does not necessarily translate to the formal equivalence that we are used to. You could have something transform into another, transform into another, transform into another, and find that intrinsic sameness, the act of unifying. But it doesn't mean it's different, right? There is a structure of relationships, or rather a sequence of relationships through which something distinct from another can be unified as the same. And I think these approaches to research, these approaches to truth and reality, consciousness, they are not, I have never come across them. I needed to do these things. I needed to invent them because I never came across them. I wanted some way to describe what I was perceiving, what I was seeing, what I was thinking. And I didn't have any way. That's why I need to invent these tools and invent these descriptions and talk about these in this language. And as a living being, as a practitioner in early 2000s, I'm using the language that I'm accessing, that I'm living through. So it makes my research contemporary, whatever. So as an emerging practitioner, I take documentation seriously, and I intend to produce archives to remember my artistic legacy. What I mean by this, I keep making art. I'm not really getting paid for it right now, but I keep doing it. But I'm not really interested in selling it for scrap either. I document, I archive, because I eventually want to get to a place where, I have retrospectives, I have dedicated arenas just for my work, because I see the kind of work that I do as intrinsically that important. So I do take documentation very seriously. And if you want to do academic research, I think you can't bypass documentation. You can't bypass, I won't necessarily say archiving, because I'm not really imposing a certain structure to these documents. I'm rather delighting in the joy that archiving as a vocation, as a profession, an archivist, that sense of mystery, that sense of reconstructing narratives, I want to allow that. That's another way of saying I'm lazy, but that's not necessarily the case. I keep thinking about how it would be to stumble stumble upon all of the work I've done and suddenly think, what makes this person do all of this work? Why are they working? What are the relationships between one work? Reconstructing my legacy and my story. I think that's important to me. So that's why I take documentation seriously. That's why I'm building an archive. That's why I keep locking up my works and storing them until I feel like I made it, until I feel like I have the financial resources to actually put my work in the hands of people who deserve it, or in the spaces that deserve it, or give it the care that it deserves, rather. When I talk about people, it's not about positions of privilege, but rather it's more about knowing that, okay, it has insurance, my work is insured, my work is secured, there are restorative capacities for it, opportunities for restoration, there is a certain environment or an ecosystem for my work to be able to really blossom, bloom. And until then, I just document. So that's good news for anybody wanting a high quality research report on this, because it's 3,000 euros to you, but it's it's a start for me. In one sentence, I should add a little bit over here about how it's a location-based VR project, but actors are accessible at certain locations. But in this is the most succinct description of what I thought when I was writing it in this book. This is the first thing that came. My prototype is an artistic moment with multiple actors and unfamiliar forms of agency through a dynamic ascription of sentience. Artistic output promised, ideally fully immersive, dynamic multi-user environment with real-time reciprocity-enabled audiovisual feedback loops. At least smartphone AR magic window compatible, depending on AIRE's capacity. I think that's self-explanatory to a certain extent. You have an artistic moment, you do have multiple actors, and there are unfamiliar forms of agency. Who's the agent? Who's sentient? Where is this behavior coming from? Who started it? Where's the causal sequence? These are the questions. And it's coming because you are ascribing sentience to different things. It's actually wrong. You're acknowledging it. But for contemporary audience, I think ascription is the more suitable term. But it's technically wrong. We're not ascribing it, we're just acknowledging. It's not something that we are doing. It's already there. We're agreeing. So this is how I see it. And the output that I'm promised, fully immersive. But of course, it has to be fully immersive. It's a VR environment. Dynamic because AIRE can do it. If AIRE couldn't, then I wouldn't even think about it. And multi-user, it's complicated because on iArt's AIRE page, it says, in the future, we can envision multi-user. But in the spatial call document, they say that they can support multi-user interaction in a dynamic format. So I'm confused. Can it or can it not? And if it cannot, then it's a serious problem because I have 4 actors. So if they cannot, then I will not make it dynamic and multi-user. I will choreograph the entire sequence myself and allow it to be accessed as a movie, which is very bland, honestly. So I do hope, even if not multi-user at the 4-actor level, at least you can have 2 or 3. Otherwise, we've not done anything new with VR. This project does not really do anything if I can't even do that. But there are real risks, right? You don't want to take on an artist and end up with nothing to show for. So at the worst case scenario, and I would hate for this to happen, But at the worst case scenario, we will at least have a smartphone AR magic window compatible VR exhibit. I mean, on one hand, it's not exactly saying I won't have the MetaQuest 3 compatibility, but it opens up access to anybody with a smartphone. And that's, let's face it, that's the most accessible technology right now. So just having that itself, especially when I think about Bengaluru, if it's Basel, then I'm not really worried. But if I think about Bangalore, then I think it would, if you make it AR window compatible, I think it has way more potential than just saying, just have the MetaQuest 3, because not everyone gets it. Not everyone has it. And even if I buy, how many can I buy? I can buy 2. I might rent 3, and that's still not enough for all the visitors, all the people. It runs out after charge. I need a power bank. And then how long can I continue the exhibit for? There are all of these problems. So if I do have at least a magic window compatibility, then something happens, right? It just opens up this VR exhibit to almost everybody. Still not everybody, but a bigger chunk of the population, a bigger segment. This image also is a little less cluttered one. It's a better description of what's happening, I think, because it's just smaller. I just resized it because Canva does not allow you to export watermarked images. So I just clicked a picture and then put it. This is a table. Of course, there's a lot of text before. And if you think, I'm not going to read through all that, I ain't reading that. And you just want a quick, precise way to know. I wouldn't call myself a mathematician, but as a aspiring mathematician, I would prefer this. This table tells me, what is the actor? What are the rules they follow? So the binding of the actors, the interactions that they are allowed, the constraints or the axioms for my mathematical universe. What is the tech that really is going to do this? Who is going to carry the weight of the technicality? And just don't tell me tech. Tell me specifically what exactly is going to happen. So this is how I envisioned it. Just maybe we can take a small detour. So this is okay, I have to acknowledge ChatGPT for some of the conversations because I don't have a collaborator right now. And if I need an intellect that can give me that back and forth so that I can develop this concept, I do have conversations with ChatGPT. So there I have acknowledged it. And you can read more about K24 itself. This is not something that I made up for Spatial Affairs, right? It's something that I've been going on and on and on and about throughout my artistic work. So there is some of that information in that conversation if anybody is interested for archiving purposes or just research purposes, trying to understand more than that's there. What I would do is, for the purpose of this, I thought I didn't want to write the grund necessarily. It was too much. I thought, why not make a mirror board and then export it and somehow fit it in? But then I started making the board and I realized that I've evolved a language that is too mystified. It's too complex. I just started making the board. And let me just tell you, like, people want to know, why do you want to do this project? Why you doing this project? Why now? These are all relevant questions. Why does this project feature in my career? Is it consistent? And there are two things. One, I have to show you that I've been doing this for quite long. I've been trying to make this happen. And the other, I need to show you that within the recent days, I am still trying. I haven't given up. It's not something that I started long ago and stopped. I'm still doing it. So these are the two things. One is, of course, I've had multiple discussions with climate organizations, sustainability actors, craftspeople, artisan designers, artisans, community, AI chatbots, locally. In my laptop itself, there'll be some K24 somewhere, another K24, another K24 over the years. The idea that I've developed, just documenting in my physical notebooks, in the works that I've written, In my art itself, the same notation keeps featuring on my Instagram. When you keep scrolling down, you will realize that this is something that I've been engaging with again and again and again and again. And there is no dearth of documents, voice notes, PDFs, pages and pages of writing. It's just full of the same vision. I haven't changed it necessarily. It's only evolved in reach in what it can do. The initial seed, the initial crew is the same. What is my most recent effort within the past 50 days? It was actually, I think, 38 to 39, 40 days, but let's say 50, fine, by the time I submitted. Yeah, I made a Miro board. For me, that was huge because all the time I've been writing. It's just a string of stuff, or it's just images or mind maps, and it's very strange. So this Miro board mind map was different because it suddenly showed me that I had some potential. Well, this is like notes from a lecture at ICTS. It's just lying around, and that's the one over here. So recently I went, I was consulting a craft entrepreneur for strategy. One person said that they were an expert in segmentation. So I asked them. Another person, I was supposed to meet them on the 15th and have sent them some information about K24 because they work with the craft entrepreneurs. They're a craft entrepreneur and they work with craft entrepreneurs as well. So I was thinking, okay, it's significantly big and I need access to a craft community, so to speak, so that I can recruit and prime and all of those stages. So those are the recent ones. At International Center for Theoretical Science, there was a lecture on metallurgy, antiquity, craft. Again, I was there. At IIHS, Indian Institute, is it Indian or international? I'm not sure, but human settlement, basically. So urban systems and urban planning, infrastructure development, etc. So there was a talk about the craft network, the sector as a sector. So I went there, I did some networking and maybe found allies. At Map Academy has been doing the history series on craft, especially in India. So that is also something I'm interested in. That was something I engaged with. Then at Gallery Sumuka, there was a show about Weaver community and they use Jacquard cards. Again, I was there. So off the top of my head, within the past 50 days, these are some things that I have done to make K24 real. So is it consistent? Is it important to me in my artistic career, or is it important to me as a personal being, as an individual who has, come into life, so to speak? Yes. And this is proof of that. I'm not going to take you through the whole Miro board, but I will just show you a little bit. So K24 intends to articulate, unifying, whatever. There are like the stages of this. What is K24? The notation for all idyllic drip, for all in the global sense. I'm talking about instantiating. Basically, you have a domain in which your logical operations are considered valid. So that's why it comes. And then basically it's just different ideas. Why are you saying this? This is because this. If I look at lush, why is it lush? Then this is a new materialistic strategy to bring matter into focus while dealing with semantics. The highest form of meaning is classically known as God and divinity. So then, it sort of takes you all around why I want to do this. So when I look at highest form of meaning, I would associate that with interaction or unification with divinity. But that's also known in enlightenment archetypes as moksha, samadhi, nirvana, etc. So could you restructure technology and tools to achieve that state, not as an end goal, but imagine a civilization starting at enlightenment? And it's such a complicated word because you already have post-enlightenment, but I do mean it in a slightly different context. That's why I say Enlightenment archetypes and whatever. So this is the meta board, and it sort of explains what K24 is, not necessarily in relation to spatial affairs. That's why I haven't made it a part of it. Also, when I export such a huge one, it comes out blurry. I wanted to export it in panels and tiles, but that didn't work out. Yeah, I will acknowledge this particular hosting NYU VRAR fundamentals. Learned quite a lot from this, and let's just close the meta board for now. Also, I guess maybe I'm surveilling some statistical data, right, about AR, and I would also acknowledge this because it made me understand some aspects of the capacities of AR, VR, and where we stand today and where it's headed. So just while I could, I saw that they were open in my browser tabs, and I just thought, yes, that it's a good opportunity to give credit where it's due. I think this particular thing, I'll just close this over here. So the rules, Breeze moves about in the space freely, needs to recharge by ruffling foliage periodically. It's a default actor. It's a semi-visible virtual presence as discrete haze, custom glittery hue. Noble has a private heimat. Manual boundary minimizes interaction. Exeunt option exposes. Mirror view of body, avatar, crafts habitat, environment for all actors. The MQ3 actually allows you to make your own avatar. So you don't really need AIRE for that particular thing. Moving about the space freely, again, MetaQuest is fine. You need to recharge, you need AIRE again. It's a default actor, you don't have to do much. Semi-visible, you need AIRE for that. So user wearing the headset enters boundary, timer nudges Breeze to perform ruffling. You know, oh, you're losing time. Go to the foliage and perform ruffling. And AIRE is the one that's brute forcing the default actor to Breeze. The user is masked as a glittery haze. I've already told you. So that also AIRE needs to manage. Private heimat, again, it's complicated because MQ3 can put your noble in a private setting, basically outside the boundary so that you don't enter. But then when the noble does raise the walls down or lower the walls, sorry, I have been saying raise the wall. That doesn't make any sense. Lower the walls down. They need to suddenly be inside the boundary, and AIRE needs to manage that. Mirror view of body, like I said, MQ3 does that. You can craft your avatar. Crafting habitat, it's just a location setting. Again, MQ3 has an option, but then their occluded environments are extremely, let's say, fictional, fantasy based. And what we are looking for really is travel destinations, not necessarily a virtual reality travel, because you want to understand where do people want to go. Do people want to go to Italy? Do people want to go to Paris? Do people want to go to Shanghai? Do people just want to go to Bali? Do people want to go to a place that is very non-mainstream, very off-beaten? So it's like giving a couple of options to understand these aesthetics. In one way, I guess we are reinforcing them, so we have to be careful with those choices. AIRE-enabled Heimat residency. You have buildings. This is what AIRE was designed and made for. Brute forcing outside manual boundary for privacy. You have an interface which you use so that the user can start and end the experience. You can choose where the user starts. You have an interface for that. So it just needs a few more options for AIRE. And MQ3 for avatar creation, environment occlusion, and again, AIRE needs to have a way to brute force it to all actors so that it's not your MQ3 headset should not allow you to change the location for you. You need to experience what the noble has chosen for you. So there's that interesting power dynamic coming there. The warrior patrols foliage locations unidimensionally. It's just in a straight line. There's front and back. There are no left and rights. If you do deviate from the path of the warrior, then you're no longer the warrior actor. You become the breeze. That's essentially what location-based role performing is. As long as you are on that, then you can perform the warrior. Feli will guide you, the visual arrows will guide you, and you walk to the next foliage location before it expires. And you don't have a choice, really. If you come across another agent, another actor, then you greet them. A greeting is traditionally over here a bow, a nod, an acknowledging, or you could have the very animated gestural one. That's up to us. And you rec occluded environment for practice, not malice. So that's just maybe a signpost, maybe a dustbin, maybe concrete infrastructure. So your occluded environment shatters and you have those pixels falling and an animated sequence, and it goes back again after a while. So the rec also emits sound. So this becomes, keep in mind, this becomes interesting when the foliage audio-visual feed is coming in. If you access the foliage network, you get audio-visual feed from all foliage networks. So if a warrior is wrecking something somewhere, and that sound is picked up by the nearest foliage locations, then you have, like different mic locations. So you have a very interesting thing happening there with the sound. It's a immersive environment of a different kind. For that, AIRE and hopefully Vive would be useful over here, because you want an animated sequence of wrecking. So the body tracking would be useful here. Location track foliage, where is the foliage located, and use it as vertex position to nudge user along warrior's path. Visual arrows Feli guided behavior prompting. User bows as a greeting, home invasion style environment wrecking sequence output. Foliage, the last actor, user confirms access to foliage network. So I really am still thinking about maybe they make a particular sound, but then, that's not accessible to all. Can everybody make a sound? Do they feel socially comfortable? Are they differently abled? So there are these aspects that come in, but we'll have to figure out a way to prompt it. They confirm audio-visual information from all foliage localities. Wherever foliage is there, there is a sensor, audio-visual sensor, so we receive that information. And this sensing is because your AIRE platform has virtualized the entire environment. So you do have access to each location. So you rely on MQ3 headsets to pick up audio, but you know how the environment looks from a particular vantage point. So all of these vantage points are fed in a multi-panel format to the user accessing foliage network. User creates foliage with timer. It's a temporal persistence. So it's not like your foliage that is going to live for eternity. It's going to live. And you apply texture at the nodes and the connector cylinder composed as a branch. Texture properties are hue and material, maybe cashmere, ruby, clay gold. I use different materials, but you're getting the idea. It's not your traditional plant, but, and of course, I want to use haptics. That's first thing. Then I also want to use olfactory, like reminiscent, olfy, smello. I'm not sure about the name, but I saw that these tech, it's available. But suddenly I thought you can't have everybody wearing it. It suddenly becomes expensive, and I was not with it at all. If your foliage is representing idyllic drip, if it's representing luxury aesthetics, then I know just the right thing for this, because I have done some research on perfumes, and I thought that, yeah, why not have some iconic perfumes? I thought about Prince Machiavelli's Paco Rabanne's Calandre. Of course, you could have Chanel N5 and have a certain budget so that at the foliage location, even if it is the cringiest way of manual spraying the perfume, I think having that at certain locations enhances the experience. We need to keep in mind about allergies, but so that's why I thought about using some iconic commercial perfumes. Yeah, Wind Song by Prince Machiavelli. I also think Mitsuko's Berlin was another top topic. So just have a couple of vials of perfumes instead of, because I saw that even Olfi, if I want to buy it, it takes me 1,500 euros. That's about almost like 3 headsets, 3 MetaQuest headsets. Can't afford it. And if I want to rent it, it was 300 per month, which is still doable actually. But it's a very localized sort of smell. That's one thing. And the second thing is you rent it, there are obviously additional costs with shipping. And then you have to pay it, you rent it for a month, and then there's the danger and risks associated with damage. And I just realized that olfactory and even maybe haptics isn't at that level yet where you can use it in an inclusive project. But with that in mind, I want to have a budget for experimenting because I believe in possibilities and I want to know, can I DIY haptics in some level so that we can have a experimental nook, a little nook and cranny of an experimental sector, a little piece of the pie, just so that you can work with manual perfumes or haptics in a very DIY format, even soldering manually, just making the haptics interface, which I want to do. That's why I have taken a small bit of the budget, and we have to be ready to lose that. If it doesn't work out, it should be fine, because it's not part of the main project. It's a cherry on the cake or icing, which will be cool if it's there. So foliage location data used to compile audio-visual input as collective foliage network output. AIRE-based UI for MQ3 output. The output is a multi-panel view and full spectrum, totality of sounds. Sounds picked up by MQ3, audio receiver, Warrior Jacktub, etc. Potential olfactory cues, right? So not promising it, but if you smell in a virtual environment, then it's just way more immersive. If you feel we are getting there, and I think that'll be cool. I was limited to 10 slides. That's why you see this format. Now, this is a much better, I think, image. So there are actors. There's the warrior. The warrior, has 2 options. Either they wreck the environment, or if it's another actor, 1, 2, 3, 4, then they bow. What does a noble do? They craft the space, body, and avatar, which means environment, location, aesthetics, soundscape. What does the breeze do? They're sort of running around, and when they need to recharge, when they have I've used the battery symbol, but ideally it will be timer. You don't even need a timer. You could have the battery again, but it's not important. It's the UI decision. But when they ruffle, they get their full charge and they get to be breeze again. And you can see that the breeze is just hazy and they're not really concrete, but you indicate it. The foliages are interesting actors. So here's the technicality. It's just a cylinder. This is the foliage location. But what does the foliage look like in the VR environment? It's just a cylinder and just again, cylinders and ice at the nodes. in contemporary terms, I guess, ice. The warrior patrols foliage network to network. So that's what they're doing. And they have only 2 options, bow or wreck. The noble has a private heimat. They have an avatar mirror view. They're customizing it. I'm sorry for using this gendered experience of noble, but I made this on Canva, basically. So I just took what I could use. And they set the locations. This is the travel locations. They exoint heimat. That means they lower the residence and expose themselves to the environment. Our occluded artifacts are part of the communal habitat, the setting. The foliage access network, these are really lame versions of the panel. Ideally, we want, like I said, organic panels or maybe even hex grid. At the worst, of course, we can settle for rectangular square panels. But you can see that these wires sort of signify that you have audiovisual input from one foliage location and another, and the user confirms this action. And yeah, this is a perfume bottle. I think it's, I'm sorry, I can't recognize the bottle. I have to credit that somewhere. The last thing is, yeah, MetaQuest. I think you press these two on the controller and you get a screen grab. So that's your people's archive. And these are the actors. I'm really hoping that this is self-explanatory, because I don't think a lot of people will listen to all of this. This is some of the work I've done. Maybe I need to add a little bit over here, but I'm not going to read this out because I'm tired, and this is not important. This is just to show that I have some mathematical maturity and I am interested in making these things accessible. Whenever there is some tech, I adapt to it and I take to it. This is to show the research itself, my interest in space and interest in music, interest in sound, in audio. And later this project does allow me to enter mathematical ontology, because I started developing a language to talk about what I understood and what I saw. This is to talk about myself as a performer. Basically, I'm an academic over here. I'm a performer and I'm a technologist, a tinkerer. And this particular link takes you to, it's a bit of a heavy file, so you have to download it. The Google Drive doesn't allow you to preview, but it takes you to the maker portfolio that I submitted while applying to MIT. And it shows that I've been interested in making what technology is actually. That's the question that I have asked. These are some aspects of my presence as a performer, even a choreographer. So, you have these different aspects coming in, because if you want to have something at space, body, technology, environment, some question, then a performer, choreographer, an academic, and a technologist tinkerer, I think that's a perfect combination. Finally, this is the budget. And I had to really squeeze everything onto one page, which is actually good, because then I can print this out and keep it. It's useful to know how I'm going to be using my resources. And this is my timetable, what I want to do. I need 2 headsets. I need the trackers. I need cables and power bank. I need a hard disk. These are non-negotiable. I need to buy them. And ideally, I would like to have audio recorders, field recorders essentially, at some locations, but budget can't force it. Then this is the experimental part, which is artistic freedom. It's only 120, 120. I'm not, these are not random things. I looked up the exchange rates and I looked up the costs of different materials. Like a hard disk would be around 120 euros, a good one. And cables are also very expensive. The MetaQuest cables were, like, the official cables were very expensive, so I won't buy the official ones. Even the power bank for MetaQuest made for that is also expensive. So we have to work around with what we can and buy non-official ones. It won't damage the headset, I think, because a lot of users have used it and we have to do our reviews properly and buy it. But I do have a few of them in mind. The Vive tracker was a steal at this level, because you get the Wi-Fi dongle and full body tracking, which is, I thought it was a good price for it. I saw some DIY haptics who they were saying you could do it for $30 and stuff, but I'm going to need to buy some tools as well, and I would estimate $100 for a decent, even if it's experimental. If it needs to work, then not dollars, euros. My bad. So I put all the cost in euros because the funding is being provided in euros, and I converted them. For me, I have to keep converting to INR to understand how much is it, how much is it, how much is it. And then I thought that 120 was good because it captures the need segment where you can buy what you need, and you have a little to handle tax and duties and these things. And as an artist fee, I'm taking 23, 230 euros. So That's about 5.47 euro a day, for 42 days, 6 weeks. And it's not that important. But for me, 23, I actually wanted to do 123, 123 over here. But then that makes me look like an idiot, like I'm just putting a random number, despite these things not being random. I was just lucky. I would like to have a 300 euro perfume budget, to be honest, because how many high-end perfumes can you buy with 120 euros? That's and because you're going to use it over the exhibit, it's going to get over. But then I thought, let's just be a little cheap about it and not go for that. Local transport 120. So the ones in blue, I'm completely willing to give everything back, especially because I don't need them. Local transport, I will try not to need it. And when I do need it, I will cycle, I will walk, because I'm going to take in the space that way and get some exercise as well. So I'm going to minimize my expenditure on commute. Accessibility support. I recently attended something like a workshop on this, and that's when I realized how important it was. And now that I've met so many differently abled people and understood some aspects of their needs, I realized that this is wrong to not have it on your budget. If you don't spend it, I'll give it back. But I think it's really important to have it and need it. So that you can invite all sorts of people. It's just not fair if only certain people come and you just systematically keep other people out. It's just pathetic. And I'm going to be documenting, right? So I need notebooks, I need some materials. Of course, I can carry the ones I have, but then that increases the luggage, and there are all of these problems. And it will be nice to have some dedicated folders just so that I can document this entire process. So I don't think I will need 100 euros, but if I need printing, because if I'm going to give presentations and then I'm going to give talks about the academic work I've been doing, then I would like to have a small marketing budget as well, which I have put into this. When you take that into account, then to make a zine, zine, 120 is another perfect figure. So I really hope this doesn't make me look immature when I put 120 all over, but I have narrowed it down as one of the perfect amounts so that I can eat it. And they are based on like real actual costs. They're not random. So that would be my production budget, about 2880. And like I said, I'm going to give the Vive tracker back, and whatever cash I don't spend, again, take it back. I don't really need it right now. That's not my intention. What do I need? I need a 3D asset designer. One person is ideally you like to have two, but you can't keep relying on people. You can't keep paying them wages with such a budget. I don't know why they would even work. So one designer would be a better option, because you don't want a lot of 3D assets, but you just want one person who can handle some of the load, who can give that input and maintain a cohesive set of aesthetics. You don't want too much disruption over there. But you need two Unity developers, I think, because they can manage the 3D aspect, but they can also integrate it into the environment. They can also work with AIRE. So they would be the bridge between the 3D asset designer and the AIRE specialist. I will need one person who knows what AIRE can do, what AIRE cannot do, and I need them to state it in unequivocally clear terms. Just knowing that is very important. So at least one dedicated point of contact to keep that interaction going. It's very important. And of course, for my experimental stuff, I need a place to solder. The fumes do come out, and the heat might damage the table. So, and when I'm testing electronics, I need some power sources, DC converters, just a space where I can tinker. And yeah, that's about it. If it's possible, I would like a temporary bicycle. If it's in Bangalore, I can use my own, but Basel, just to borrow for the period of the residence. I don't want to buy a bicycle, but because it's easy and it's cost effective, then I can return all of the money from local transport to the funders. And yes, you need it to be site independent, the project, but like MetaQuest itself has a specification of certain 5 feet by, I'm not sure. I've checked on the website, different websites do say or recommend different settings, but I think at least for the Heimat of the noble, so that they can play around within that, there needs to be a significant environment, a neutral space where you can set it up. No matter where the site is, we need to choose a space that's appropriate for VR, right? You can't take site independence in its literal way, literal sense. So like I said, perfume, the cost was too much, and haptics also cost is too much. So that's about it. A hard disk was important because even if you have a people's archive on social media, at least having a dedicated storing, I think 4 TB is a good starting point. Ideally, like to have 8 for an exhibit, especially if it goes to Mesh Festival, then you need 8. But I think 4 TB is what we can afford with 120 euros. So that's where we are. How does my timetable look like? So that's a complicated question because I don't have work weeks. I don't have Sundays and Saturdays. As an artist, you work all the time, 24/7. It's not like you start at 8 and finish at 5. You are documenting post that. When you take your early morning walk, you are drawing. And there's a constant body of work. It's a lifestyle. There's no separation between work and play or anything like that. So it was difficult for me because I do want to wake up very early. I want to go around the space, but is that work? I'm documenting, I'm engaging with it. So when they said, give me a work timetable, I decided, okay, let's just say ideally maybe in Switzerland, um, in places even in India, there are 8 to 5:30, 8 to 5, maybe 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. work weeks. So I said, okay, let's take a break for maybe lunch, put it between 12 to 2. It's not that I won't do anything from 12 to 2. It's just that if I'm going to eat something for breakfast or figure out something for coffee or tea or some beverage or just relax, then, totally it should not exceed 2 hours when I'm working. So I just put it as a slot there. And yeah, 8 to 10, I want to document. As soon as I am starting my day, I want to sort of know, like a recap. This is what I did. That's what I did. This is what these people said. This is what I felt. This is where we are. I want to really work on that. Then 10 to 12, I want to learn, right? I want to also upskill. I want to work with Unity. I want to work with the platform. I want to attend the workshops that AIRE has facilitated. I want to go around and sort of make my practice more robust, become better, and discuss, study. If I'm able to talk about my mathematical ontology with somebody, that would be the greatest gift this residency can give, because then it will further my research practice. And of course, then I want to also do some overseeing. If I have asked the Unity developers or AIRE specialists something, and I've asked 3D designers something, then I want to also know what is the work that's being done. And I want to co-curate or co-create a certain direction to our decisions. There has to be some set of aesthetics that we're aspiring to moving towards. So I didn't want to use overseeing or managing or administrating, but as an artist, if you are obligated, if you have a responsibility to produce a stable artistic output, for sure, then I think you need to keep, coming down, touchdown periodically, understand what is happening, and sort of manage the direction, creative direction of the project. So I don't like that hierarchy that's a connotation in this, but I can't pretend like there is a better way to do it. If I am doing this project, then I need to know who's doing what, and it's not a free experimental project. It's a outcome based one. Then of course exploring the local context. That's the whole point of a residency. Knowing, one is documenting, of course, but documenting is a process. Exploring is actually engaging, getting the stuff to document, the experiences, the memories, and the learnings that's going to happen in exploring. I'm mostly listening. I'm not saying anything. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. I'm not trying to create something. I'm not trying to restrict or constrain or steer. I'm just absorbing and listening. And I really mean that in active listening or opening up the senses, tasting, looking, just getting all of this immersion, the sensory stimuli and the perspectives, the emotions, just embodied research, taking it all in. So engaging in local initiatives, that's what I mean, looking around um, and of course, I can't keep doing the same thing all throughout the 6 weeks because that doesn't really make sense to me. Initially, I want to survey. I want to know what is there. I want to focus on understanding the infrastructure, understanding the systems, understanding the initiatives, understanding what is there, just surveying it, and then conveying what I want to do. It's also about establishing that rapport. Initially, it's going to be confusing. If I say these are the actors, what do you mean by actor? What do you mean by breeze? How do you want it to be seen? Just again and again, reiterating over and over with the same ideas, explaining where I come from, really taking, that time to make sure everybody understands what we are trying to do. So conveying that, developing that synergy, developing those relationships, I think that's going to be key in the first 2 weeks. Then I want to tinker and discourse and develop. What I mean by that is while I'm tinkering, I'm getting thoughts. My fellow practitioners, my peers are also getting interesting ideas. We communicate that with each other. We talk, we set presentations, we give public demos, lectures, and then we sort of start to develop the main body of the project, the actual framework for deploying. So that's going to be week 3 and 4, getting it ready. And I don't want to have an over ambitious project. I really want to have something that people can immerse themselves into. So we need to end early. We need to stop developing very quickly. And by week 5 and 6, we need to start deploying it. We need to invite beta testers. We need to debug it. We need to test. And while we're doing that, I feel like most of the work that I wanted to do is done. So now I can really start compiling all of the documents that I have made, start compiling it into a report, something cohesive and something substantial, something worth reading, something important, like a manifesto or even just a white paper, just saying that this is what we did, this is what we were trying to do, this is what we learned. And really, that last section is going to be not much of me. I'm not the power player anymore. I'm not going to do much other than compile. But of course, I'm going to test and deploy and debug. That's the idea. So this is how I've structured my weeks and my days. And I know that not everybody wants to work all the time. So these only apply to me. That's why my time is used the way it is. I don't want to implicate somebody else into my workaholic, uh, aspect or nature. So that would be my timetable, and this would be the CV. I've done a lot of work. I've been accepted into some programs, but they don't feature here. Mostly when I think about a CV, I think, what did I get paid for? That's my idea right now, because I want to sustain as an artist and I want to have a commercially thriving practice. So I'm really thinking about who paid me for what. It's not, over here is not about what work did I feel is meaningful, what have I done that is great or whatever. It's more about, did they pay me? Was I employed? And over here it's about what did I study? And I'm an outsider in academia, I'm an outsider in art institutions. I've entered them, but I've also left them very quickly. So it's very hard for me to say I don't have an undergrad degree, because technically I don't. I haven't finished my studies. But if I had a credit transfer system over here, then I've done enough semesters to earn an undergrad degree. And I've done it in across fields. I've done engineering, I've done design, I've done math. And while studying itself, I don't just read, or it's not just some article that I've read from a it's not a storybook, or it's not somebody else's opinion. When I do engage with psychology, when I do engage with philosophy, I go to the root. I try to deal with the authors themselves. And my only shortcoming is that I haven't read them in their native language. in the actual language that it was written. I have read translations. But other than that, I do conduct studies, I take notes, and I really go deep into what they're trying to say. So when I do these independent studies, it's not just, it's not trivial. It's a deep and engaging interest until I understand the key insights, until I understand my own position in this framework, until I develop the vocabulary to articulate my position, to convey it, to write about it, to discourse about it, and to build on it. I don't stop. Once I hit that depth, then I feel like I've mastered it to a certain extent. This episteme or this academic discipline, this silo. And these are my current interests. That's what I've been looking at. And it's not important for everybody, but I think it's the equivalent of having hobbies. It's just something that I'm looking forward to or looking at. Just a small footnote about where my academic journey is going. I mentioned this because I am ambitious in terms of research, academic research. I do want to go to certain institutions, be perceived in a certain way, have access to certain infrastructure. I want to be in those spaces. It's just that I haven't been able to survive there for numerous reasons. I'm sorry if this seems like a bit of a braggadocio, but I'm trying to be as honest as I can. And this is me. This is my bio. He's a student of possibility, localized in Bangalore, India. They aspire to be known as the greatest artist of the century. They perform mark-making via memory as the artist entity AYF initiative, where memory is both the tool and the medium. He is committed to studying consciousness using probes across disciplines to perform inquiry. Currently, early 2024, the practice is using mathematical ontology to generate a rigorous system of representations homotopic to consciousness, with life and reality as subsets. Their artistic career has explored philosophy, poetry, visual art, audio-musical, conceptual works, breaking b-boying, sculptures, design, academic research, technoethics, code computing, movement art, theater, linguistics, pure math, rapping, and has finally arrived at the gates of XR, seeking to enter nano and quantum computing. He is academically inclined and has been formally exposed to numerous institutions par excellence. Moreover, they actively engage with contemporary research developments by attending conferences and events ranging from craft histories and urban planning to evolutionary genetics and theoretical physics. They continue to generate a body of work and are steadily building a public image as an avant-garde artist non-pareil. Having been born on the internet, they are highly international in sensibilities and poised to represent South Asian interests in the global art scene. She awaits the major breakthrough that makes the lifestyle they were groomed for finally attainable. This entails a self-inquiry into their own culture, heritage, and aspiration.
Yeah, I was almost done. Kind of done. This is just some stuff that I generated with Copilot and Bing. I just gave descriptions of what I really wanted to see, and none of these are actually hitting it, but I think they convey it, they get it across. And I just pasted the concept note into Copilot, and it generated this piece of text. And I think it's interesting to know what an AI has to say about a project proposal just from the writing. So yeah, you can see the warrior wrecking it, and it's funny, I don't have one of them bowing. And the noble, the multi-panel view. This is not how it's going to look, of course not. This is way too high-end graphics, and even the foliage, but I think it does a good job of conveying where it could go. It's a good direction. Links, obviously, some behind the scenes, and thank you for bearing with me.